Today, then, we continue with this topic, which I know can be a bit unsettling and arouses curiosity, talking about death. No one likes to talk about it, as if by not speaking of death, we could somehow keep it from drawing near to us. When we turn our backs on something, the most that can happen is that it catches us from behind. There really is no way to escape death. Just to remind you, we are within the cycle of this book. The idea is to talk about every chapter of this book, Seeking Wisdom, by the author Sri Ram, who passed away in 1973, in other words, a recent author. Since it is a very special book, I wanted to include it in the project of discussing all its chapters. Today, we are now on the 9th chapter. There are only 15 in total, and today it will address this theme, meeting death as a friend. The idea is truly to demystify death, to help us see that death and life are not so different after all. That would be the summary I would make of today's theme. The idea is to demystify such a complex word, isn't it? Death, and to learn to coexist with it while we are still alive. We will see how this unfolds. It is very common for this author, Sri Ram, to draw inspiration from other writers. You will see that our next chapter, which is The Song of Life, is a beautiful chapter, chapter 10, my favorite in the book. He draws inspiration from a book called The Light on the Path. Today, this is a Platonic chapter. He speaks about Plato throughout, which made me very happy, because I too am very fond of Plato. And Plato, as interpreted by Sri Ram, is an excellent author commenting on another excellent author. Plato's works, in general, though this is debatable, as some works are not considered authentic or legitimate, some are apocryphal, as they say, are usually classified as 9 tetralogies. One of the Wow, today I am using some complicated words. One of the tetralogies, there it is the one that deals with the death of Socrates. Socrates, his Greek master, who, already at the age of 80, was condemned by the city of Athens to drink hemlock, in other words, to drink poison, to die for having corrupted the youth, among other accusations. Which is something quite curious, if you consider that in such a corrupt moment in Athens, it was Socrates who was accused of corrupting the youth. But in any case, it's debatable. He was already 80 and was condemned to drink the poison. After 10 years living alongside Plato, who was his principal disciple, Plato honored him in his works by making Socrates the main character in almost all of them. Almost all the dialogues have Socrates as the main character, because Socrates himself did not write anything at all. So, we have these 4 works, which include the Euthyphro, starting from the moment Socrates arrives at the court. It was an odd thing. We tend to think that we are living in the only era where human flaws have created complex situations for living in society. Look, it is not easy. Human flaws have been active. When we talk about ancient Greece, don't think that everyone there was a Socrates or a Plato. In ancient Greece, condemning someone was easy to do. In Athens, it was easy. Any citizen could come and post an accusation on the wall of the court. And they chose the jurors through what they called white pebbles and black pebbles. You would go out into the street and pick up a pebble. If you drew a white pebble, any person, any citizen, of course, not everyone was considered a citizen, could serve as a juror. And the person would defend themselves, and depending on how sympathetic they appeared to the jurors, they would be acquitted or sometimes condemned to death for a senseless accusation. On one occasion, there was, let me recall who the figure was, I can't remember now, it was a Greek general from Athens, and there was an idea in Sparta to carry out an attack against him. Because he was very capable, an excellent military leader, and he had been inflicting many defeats on Sparta. Then, finally, in the Spartan council, they came to the conclusion that they did not need to worry about killing the Athenians, because the Athenians would kill their own. And, in fact, this general, shortly after being a war hero and saving the city of Athens, was sentenced to death. He had to flee from Athens. Now I remember. His name is quite well known. In any case, Athens had these inconsistencies. And Socrates, when he arrives at the court, summoned to learn of his accusation, this is the first dialogue, Euthyphro, where he meets a young man who was about to bring an accusation against his own father. And there they discuss compassion, mercy, It is a very interesting dialogue. Soon after comes the apology of Socrates, where Socrates himself defends himself before the court. Then comes the credo, which is the moment when one of his disciples tries to save him, to rescue him from prison. And finally, one of the most beautiful works in all of Plato's writings, the Phaedo, which depicts Socrates in his final moments, the last hours before his death, including the moment when he has already taken the poison. So, these four dialogues, especially the Phaedo, are often highlighted by Sri Ram because he says, look, it is very rare to witness someone facing death with such serenity, and for this to be documented, moment by moment. For someone to confront death with such dignity in the history of humanity, and for this to be documented in such a way, is a rare occurrence. Therefore, it is worthwhile to learn about the death of Socrates, philosopher facing death. He is about to begin discussing this, then. He will say something quite intriguing. In the Phaedo, when Socrates' disciples enter his cell, there were 3 hours left before his execution. He was an 80-year-old man, and he was shackled in irons with fetters. What reason would an 80-year-old man have to need shackles? But that is how he was imprisoned. And when they entered his cell, the shackles had just been removed. And they find him rubbing his leg, which was evidently sore. When people ask what had happened, do you think he talks about something personal? My leg. It hurts. Not at all. He says how curious human consciousness is. Because pleasure is simply the opposite of pain. A few minutes ago, I felt pain, now I feel pleasure. One is equal to the other. Pleasure as relief from pain. And the mind remains in this polarity. It's interesting, isn't it? Because he never speaks in a personal way. Oh, how I am a sufferer. They put me in chains. Now my leg hurts. Never see how curious the human mind is. It lives in duality. This is interesting. An old Chinese proverb, which you may have heard and is quite well known, says that mediocre men talk about other men. Ordinary men talk about things, and wise men talk about ideas. And Socrates is like that. You never see him descending to the personal level, not at any moment. So it is interesting, even, the way he puts it, because it is a fact that this pleasure we consider so good and so important is simply a relief from pain. It is like that critical moment of anesthesia at the dentist. When you arrive with a toothache and he gives you an anesthetic. Isn't paradise? Don't angels sing hallelujah? You had pain and it was gone. Both are equal, neither is superior. It is, let us say, a dialogue of opposites that keeps humanity bound. In pleasure, one fears pain. In pain, one expects pleasure. One cannot escape or rise above this level. Sri Ram will say, when they give him the poison, he begins to describe the effect of the poison on his body and continues the dialogue. This dialogue is, above all, focused on one theme, the existence of the immortal soul, the immortality of the soul. The man is dying. They give him hemlock, ask him to walk a little, and then to sit down. He says he can no longer feel his feet and continues philosophizing. I can't feel my legs anymore, and he keeps philosophizing. Until he lies down and covers his head with a sheet. Now it is over. It is curious, this serenity, engaging with ideas until the last moment. And it is very interesting what Sri Ram says, which we must consider. When a human being achieves this, it is a sign that all of us possess this potential, this possibility. Because the legacy of a human being who reveals themselves is the legacy of all human beings who remain hidden. That is why, when one person is victorious, it gives hope to all of humanity. If you ever read a book, you may have heard of the Bhagavad Gita, which is an Indian classic. For those who are already students of the school, you know it well. But after the Bhagavad Gita, there is a book called the Uttarajita, which is its continuation. The Uttarajita says, whenever you feel down, whenever you feel discouraged, look to the horizon and see Arjuna, the prince, who stands victorious atop a mountain of his enemies. In other words, the prince who has conquered himself. Look to the horizon, see someone triumphed. If they did, you can too. Isn't interesting? If you think you won't make it, look to those who have succeeded. If you think victory is impossible, look to the one who was victorious. That is why Plato said it was so important to cultivate the idea of the hero in human memory. This hero who has conquered himself. So it is quite curious. And he says, well, it is rare in history to witness something like this. The certainty of the soul and the philosopher's serene acceptance of death. This would be absurd, because Socrates said his whole life that this was possible. Life tested him, and he honored it. He always said death could be faced with serenity. Imagine at the moment of your death, not having serenity. He honored it and the truths through his actions. And this is a unique episode in human history. Sri Ram is going to say something very interesting. Every day, we watch the sunrise and the sunset. To our senses, this is an indisputable fact. No one would say the sun neither rises nor sets. It seems obvious, but it is not. It seems true, but it is not. We know that the sun neither rises nor sets, not at all. It is standing still there at the center of the solar system. Not still because the system itself moves around the galaxy's center, but relative to Earth, it is completely still. We are the ones who are moving. And yet, this reality seems to contradict the evidence our senses present to us. We see it rising and setting. But, despite this, there is an underlying truth, which is not that one. And today, science has already proven this. If you had said this in the Middle Ages, people would laugh at you. How can the sun not rise and set? I am seeing it rise and set. Not everything you see is true. There are underlying truths. So you look at a lifeless body and say, it's over, it's finished, that's the end. And yet, perhaps not, even though you are seeing it. There may be an underlying truth. There may be a life that continues beyond that body. Therefore, the first thing is, don't take so seriously what appears to you as evidence, because our criteria for testing evidence are rather weak. It leaves much to be desired, for sometimes, in the future, we laugh at the evidence of the past. Things are not quite so, not so exact as they seem. So, there may be an underlying truth to physical death. Why don't we try to think in these terms? If this has happened so many times throughout history, then he speaks of the dialogue. There are 3 hours left until the death of Socrates. His wife enters with their children, then his disciples come in, and he begins to engage in dialogue. He invites his disciples to start sharing ideas about why the soul is immortal. And so they enter into dialogue. It is a very interesting and beautiful thing to do, but extremely difficult, because it requires everyone to understand that no one owns the truth. If someone believes they have the truth, this attitude ends dialogue, blocks it, and causes arguments or quarrels. Dialogue needs humility and the awareness that one does not know everything. So everyone shares opinions, and Socrates guides the discussion. Then someone asks, isn't the soul like the music of a lyre? The body is the lyre, and the soul is the sound that comes from it. It's a beautiful idea, but he says no. As Carlos Drummond de Andrade would say, it's a rhyme, but not a solution. If it were so, when the lyre breaks, where is the music? The soul would depend on the body. Some say the soul could be like fire, the body like the wood that burns, and the soul, the fire. But that doesn't hold either, because when the wood is gone, the fire ends. Yet the soul endures and precedes the body. This is interesting because he doesn't just refute it. He explains why he believes it isn't so. Plato, in another dialogue, points out that this way of thinking is quite curious. He says that such a perspective would, in the future, give rise to a very materialistic approach to philosophy, which is interesting since it happened as he said. Not only in terms of the existence of the soul, but in many other matters, Plato is almost. I wouldn't say he was a seer, He was simply very logical and foresaw things that are now reality, as if he had lived just last week. His political insights are remarkably accurate. It is truly impressive. It seems he read today's newspaper and saw the latest municipal election results. His political predictions are very precise. And also humans, as if he understood, more or less, the elements that make up the psyche and its combinatorial analysis, what it can lead to. So, Plato says that this way of thinking, that the soul is a byproduct of the body, will, in the future, give rise to various irreligious forms of philosophy. Now, pause. We will pause. To read Plato, to read Sri Ram, in fact, between us, I don't want to discourage you, but every great author will require you to reconstruct your vocabulary. Do you know why? Because our words have become too empty. We don't really know exactly what we are saying. So, be careful not to make premature judgments. For Plato, religion is not what we usually think of. It is not an institution with a sign that says religion. He speaks of religion as religio, as religare, as that which unites heaven and earth, the realm of ideas and the material realm. He speaks of religion as that which elevates humanity to its own essence. And he asks, what should be considered religious? Everything. Do you know what? The way we, for example, clean this room, if I clean it thinking that you will come here, attend this lecture, and perhaps enjoy it. Perhaps it will make a difference in your lives. This is a religious act. It uplifts me, reconnects me to something ideal, elevates my consciousness. If I clean a window trying to see more clearly, that is a religious act. If I do it simply for what I will gain from it, then it is no longer so. It becomes a horizontal line. Do you understand this idea? Much later, a very interesting thinker, Immanuel Kant, said something similar. He says that whatever cannot be made sacred is a sign that it should not be done. To put it simply, this is one of the moral precepts that Kant presents, and I find it very beautiful. Think of something that, for you, holds a sacred meaning. It could be the image of your father, who was an excellent father. It could be a historical figure who greatly inspires you. It could be a prayer. It could be any life situation that for you inspires something very elevated. Every time you are about to do something, you should be able to stop and say, do it in the name of this. Because if this is fair and should be done, it should be able to be consecrated. Do it in the name of my Father. Do it in the name of that which I believe in, of that feeling. If you cannot do this, if you feel ashamed, if it cannot be done, this is a sign that you should not be doing it. Because even the simplest actions in life could be consecrated. What cannot be consecrated shows it is not moral and should not be done. Isn't that interesting? It broadens morality, giving a metaphysical dimension to the moral aspect, something Kant was deeply concerned with establishing. So, Sri Ram says something quite intriguing. Well, Plato often adds that truth is necessarily religious. That is, it elevates, it creates a sense of reconnection. But not everything that is considered religious today is truth. In other words, the reverse is not always true. Just as human beings are made of both, the shadow and the light, so too is the world. Institutions, all of them. So the reverse is not necessarily true. Not everything that is considered religious is necessarily true. But truth, if it is genuine, is necessarily religious. It elevates, building a bridge between two worlds. That is why the wise man was called a pontiff, with feet on earth and head in the realm of ideas. He communicated between the two worlds. So, continuing on. There is a passage from Plato in another dialogue called The Republic. The last chapter is so different from the rest of the book that people say that wasn't written by Plato, but it was. There, he speaks in a way that is no longer logical. It is almost like a myth, a revelation. He speaks of a man, heir, who would have died, truly died, as my grandmother used to say, and returns from the beyond to tell people what is truly valuable and what is not in life. It is precisely this idea that death and life create a contrast that gives rise to consciousness. So, air returns from the world of the dead to the living precisely to say that what truly matters in a person's life are values, virtues, and wisdom. It is considered a metaphysical episode, a Platonic one. The worth of life lies in what you build within yourself. The construction of material things is merely a secondary product. Continuing on, there is another passage that is told from the life of Socrates, which Philippe Rama also mentions, saying that people once came to Socrates and asked him, "Socrates, where do the living come from?" Then Socrates, who sometimes had a playful sense of humor, turned and replied, "What do you mean? Where do the living and the dead come from?" He answered with a question, didn't he? The person said, "Socrates, what a silly question. The dead come from the living." He replied, "What a silly question. Of course the living come from the dead." In other words, it's obvious, it's a vicious circle, an eternal return. And everything in the universe would be like this, not exactly a vicious circle, but a virtuous one. It is the circle of life, eternity. Naturally, Plato and Sri Ram believe in the idea of reincarnation. I am not presenting this as an absolute truth. But notice that the idea is logical. A philosopher considers possibilities and entertains ideas, not rejecting anything a priori. But it is not a prerequisite for anyone to read Plato and believe in reincarnation. But what is interesting that Sri Ram points out is that Plato is showing us that everything in the world works this way. Opposites generate each other. This is a law of nature. Where did darkness come from? Was it not from the light that ceased? And where did brightness come from? Was it not from the darkness that was illuminated? And heat? Was it not the cold that was warmed, and vice versa? Heat comes from cold, light from darkness, softness from resistance, life from death. Why would it be any different? Opposites generate each other. This is also spoken of in Egypt in the Kybalion. Opposites mutually generate one another. Day gives rise to night, night gives rise to day, and so on, eternally. So, perhaps with death and with life, it is also the same. It is a hypothesis that Plato leaves for future generations to prove. There are things that he deduces logically. He explains what justice and love are, and sometimes challenges you, prove it. You, from the future, figure it out. And this is an intriguing and suggestive idea to be demonstrated. Whoever wishes to prove it, let them prove it. But that's how it is. Do you remember Chico? I don't know. I just know that's how it is. In other words, this Platonic suggestion is still there to be demonstrated to this day. One of Socrates' arguments in this dialogue, which is the Phaedo, is that he says, imagine the concepts you have of things through your senses. And the reason that processes this sensory information. All the concepts you have about things are comparative. They are adjectives. They are comparative. Do you think this chair is small? Because you know big and compare it to the chair. Is it soft? Because you know firm. Big, small, soft, firm, left, right, north, south. Everything is comparative. Adjectives require multiplicity. They require comparison. Now, when you speak, for example, of justice, of love, of truth, of fraternity, you cannot define them by comparison to anything else, but only by themselves. Love isn't just the absence of hatred. You can lack hatred and still not love. Nothing. It is not comparable. Justice is the absence of injustice. But someone may not be unjust, yet also not just. The third is not excluded, and the fourth and fifth allow many possibilities. Justice cannot be defined by comparison. Love cannot be defined by comparison. Goodness. They can only be defined by themselves. It is an essence that is more felt than explained. This is not an impression that came through the senses. The senses would not be capable of defining something like this. So, where did these concepts come from? He says that the soul brought these concepts with it. This is what he calls reminiscences. The soul brought these concepts with it, and they have nothing to do with the sensory world. If you do not see anyone just around you, and I tell you that justice does not exist, you will say that it does exist. I don't see it, but I know it's somewhere. In fact, it is within me. It does not depend on observation or the senses. It is a certainty is an intimate experience that the soul brings with it. Well, if the soul brought something with it, what do you deduce from that? That it existed before the body. If it existed before, will it exist later? Obviously. If you prove that there are things that were not born from the body, it means there are things that will survive it. This is one of the many arguments he uses within this dialogue. This is just one example that Sri Ram presents. He spends all final hours before dying showing the soul is immortal. He dies certainly. He will use here a concept that Aristotle would later explore extensively, which states that anything that is composite, everything that is made up of parts, will one day dissolve and break down into its components. If you have H2O, one day it will return to hydrogen and oxygen. It will decompose. If something is composite, it will decompose. Then he arrives at the conclusion that, if the soul endures, it cannot be composite. It must be a single substance. It must possess the quality of being one. And this conclusion is excellent. It is interesting that Plato links the arguments together. Because if you take a concept, the concept of God, which is a complex concept, you cannot attribute any adjective to this concept except for one. Do you realize that the idea of God associated with the absolute, any adjective you assign to him, you limit him? If you say he is red, then he is not blue, so he is not absolute. There is him and blue, so there are two. If you say he is square, he is not round, there is the square and the round, there are two. And he ceases to be absolute with any adjective you assign to him. The only thing you can say about the divine is that it is one. There is nothing outside it. One and whole. So, what conclusion do we reach with this? If there is anything in the manifested universe that also possesses this quality of being one, it is as if it were a footprint of the world of ideas in the world. Concrete. This allows us to see God in all things. That which is one, that which cannot be divided, this is a fragment of the divine that passes through all beings. Just like the thread of a necklace that runs through the beads, which the Indians call satratma, the thread that passes through all beings. If we have, for example, the sunset, which we were speaking ill of earlier, just a moment ago, now let us speak well of it. I even gave you this example last week. When you look at the sunset, nothing can be taken away. Let's add red. No painter, no matter how perfectionist, would add more red to the sunset. Nor would they take away yellow, nor add or remove anything. It is perfect, it is one. That which you can neither take away from nor add anything to is a sign that there is a perfect moment of nature present. It is one, therefore, it is a trace of the divine. If something like this exists within you, it too is a trace of the divine. When you witness a person performing an honorable act, it is like a sunset. Nothing is left over, nothing is missing. A moment of justice, an act of love. Ah, he could have been a little more loving. Love is complete in itself. Nothing was missing or in excess. Then you begin to see God in all things. In other words, if the soul is like this, it is a trace of the divine. It is as if we were to tear the veil of illusions and find some reflections of unity amidst multiplicity in everything that is self-sufficient. Nothing left, nothing missing, one. It is God's mark in the world. It is the unity within multiplicity. It's interesting that he says this. He also says that the soul is more or less awakened than another, but it is immutable. Can I call someone soulless? At least mentally. If you have done this, you have committed a sophism in addition to offending the person, because no one is truly soulless. It seems that all of us, in essence, have a soul of the same substance, of the same nature, like a single thread. that pass through all the beads of every student. What we have that is different, inside all those little beads, what sets us apart is the level of consciousness we have about this. A little cup. You dip a small coffee cup into the ocean. You have a little what? Ocean water. Go there. You have more of what? Ocean water. Did the quality change or did the quantity change? Only the quantity. So, what fundamentally distinguishes a more ignorant person from a wiser one is the awareness of that which is divine, perfect, and unchanging within them. And ultic, break time equals 0.5s/NGT. But it does not mean that one possesses this essence and the other does not. All are equally endowed in the universe, in essence. But some are more or less aware of this. I always give an example to my students. I turn off the lights. Using a flashlight, I shine it on you. I widen the beam and shine it on her. First it reached you, then her. But if I flipped the switch, I would see that everyone has been here the whole time. This is an illusion. The illusion of the passage of time is actually the movement of light, of my consciousness. And so it is with the human soul. It is present at all times, seen it or not. But that does not mean it does not exist or is not present. It is equally present in everyone. Therefore, never again call anyone soulless, not even in your thoughts, because that concept does not exist. The soul has a nature of life. It is not a mental creation. This is very fitting, because even in his time, which was not so long ago, in 1973, for the younger ones among us. Long ago. It was yesterday. 1973 was already a time when, as today, the prevailing idea was existentialist. I exist and then I invent my essence, my spirit, out of fear of death. And we are still living in that same era. In thought, we have made little progress. And we tend to believe that everything metaphysical, everything spiritual, everything that endures, is merely a human invention to survive psychologically in the face of death. He was already protesting against this notion. The soul is not a mental invention. Perhaps the body is an invention of the soul rather than the other way around. Hence that saying, I have a soul. You should actually say, I have a body. Reality lies in that which endures. What is fleeting is, by its very nature, illusory. Continuing our story, Socrates, already holding a cup of hemlock in his hand, with the composure befitting a philosopher of his stature, says, acquire virtues and wisdom in life. An authentic philosopher has his mind oriented toward truth and virtue. He knows that, among all the things of value he must acquire, these are the ones that are truly real. I don't know if any of you have read it. I've insisted, but I'm not sure I convinced anyone to read The Prophet by Khalil Gibran. I have given lectures on every chapter of this book to see if I could be persuasive. There is one chapter in which he speaks about dwellings. He asks, why do you lock your doors? What is so precious within your homes? Do you, by any chance, have justice, kindness, fraternity, or goodness in your home? If you lack these, why protect? You have nothing valuable. In other words, why so much protection? What do you really have of value? In the end, we see that when someone faces death, this is how it is. One does not stop to think about the number of digits in their bank account. Her thoughts turn automatically to how much she has grown in life and how much she has allowed others to grow through her. In that moment, you see what matters and what is real. It is contrast that awakens consciousness. So, he will say, an authentic philosopher should seek, because philosophy is the spirit of improvement, not perfection. We are all constantly striving for this. An authentic philosopher is someone who, every year, makes a list of the things they love most in life. And from one year to the next, new things must earn a place on the podium of this selection. A little more justice, a little more balance, a little more fraternity, a little more kindness, a little more compassion. I love. so much. But here, fraternity moved up from 6th to 5th place. I have grown. Among the things I love most, there must be real things. Because otherwise, when faced with death, I will be left empty-handed. At that moment, you cannot stay conscious. You have nowhere to hold on to. You lose everything real. So, the mind directed toward virtue. You may know a phrase from the founder of clinical psychology, a great thinker, Carl Jung, who said that the man of the 20th century, who talks so much about economics, is a squanderer. And he squanders the most precious thing, the spirit. The opportunity to have real things. We squander it. We do not dedicate time. These things. Look, if you strive hard to be a little less selfish, you might manage just a tiny bit. If you leave it to chance, we will see what happens. You will achieve nothing. This is very hard even if you focus and have a goal. If not, you achieve nothing. It takes a great effort to combat selfishness. And many other vices as well. All of them are formidable opponents. So, it's not that easy. Well, that's what Sri Ram says, and I agree with him completely, in every sense. He says the following: philosophy today is an extensive argumentation within an ordinary life. In other words, we do not necessarily treat philosophy as a search for values. It has become a search for information. Don't be upset with me or with him. But this is a conclusion you should take into consideration. The argument I always make is this: imagine a rather ordinary situation. Someone asks you to lend them a sum of money. You have that amount available to lend. Then you want to know, what guarantees do I have that you will pay me back? And I say to you, I have 4 university degrees, including a master's and a doctorate. Does that make you confident that I will pay you back? I wouldn't be confident. Because, unfortunately, that doesn't guarantee much. It should, but it doesn't. Isn't that curious? That the amount of information does not result in human quality. Is it necessary? In fact, if we look for the major problems in our current society from an economic and social perspective, are they the result of the uneducated person or the educated one? Who causes the great crises? Is it the uneducated or the educated? It wouldn't even be right to use the word cultured, because cultured comes from cultivating, from planting seeds deep in the earth so that they sprout upright, reaching for the sun. In other words, this is neither culture, nor information, nor education. We couldn't use that word either. We must create another word. It's quantitative information about extension. In other words, a lot of information within an ordinary life. A life that has not been transformed in any way by that information. You do not give better responses to circumstances because of it. That old example we give in the classroom, a person giving a speech about fear. And when a rat enters the room, he is the first to jump onto the table. In other words, it is not information that gives you answers for life. It does not better prepare you to respond to life. He says that philosophy is the love of truth, and love implies action. Love cannot be merely a theory. Act so that I may see you, said Socrates. And then we will see if your actions take into account the ideas you speak of. Have you ever stopped to think about that? There are many words for us to reflect on. If you say, for example, I understand what you are saying, what can I presume? That when you act, you will take that into consideration. I tell you, I understand that the chair is in the middle of the way. The lights went out. I understand. Bang, I hit the chair. I didn't understand. If I had, I would have noticed that obstacle while moving around. I see what you understand and believe by the way you move through the world, not by what you say. Isn't that so? Show me. Start moving, and then I will see what you truly understand and believe. Otherwise, it's just theory, quantitative. As Shankaracharya used to say, a remedy does not take effect. just because you have pronounced its name. This is merely an accumulation of information, with nothing formative behind it. Philosophy is love of truth, and love implies action. Truth brings about a shift in our interests, from the senses and fleeting pleasure to what is noble and authentic. So we must reflect and evaluate. I love taking that time management course in January. Time management and planning really fit perfectly, don't they? Everyone is eager to plan their year. But people only plan things. What I will do, where I will go, what am I going to buy? What will I let go of? He doesn't plan what I will be. What is the flaw that I will polish a little this year? So it gets a little smaller. You realize that the failures you had in relation to things last year were due to virtues you didn't have. Then you plan to do things again. You will fail again, because you still don't have virtues. You still don't have the economic control to buy that thing. Well, I didn't plan for this. I'm not going to buy it again. It's not that having or not having things is good or bad, necessary or not. But the prerequisites for you to interact with the world effectively are in the realm of being, not of having. Do you plan for this? Being a little less selfish. Generally, we don't do this. Our mechanical tendency is to plan actions, routines, things, possessions, and nothing more. So, we do not turn our interest toward what is noble and authentic. With a mind oriented toward truth and wisdom, the philosopher is prepared for death. You might say, wow, what a morbid person. I don't want to know about virtue or wisdom or prepare for death. Dreadful. Why is he saying this, everyone? In fact, last week, we talked a little about this. Do you want to grow? Each day, something in you dies and something else is born. Something small like this dies. Today, my habit died and a new possibility was born. My tendency not to greet someone in the elevator died. Oh, that's nothing, but it is something. A new possibility was born. Every day you die here, are born, die, are born. Do you know what happens? You adapt to death. When it comes, the death of the body, you can say, hi, I've known you a long time, my companion, I've lived with you my whole life. So, you take the drama out of death. You learn to live with it. Do you understand? You are with a close friend. Someone who fears death does not die inside. They go through life unchanged. Only the outside changes and biology completes its cycle. Their psychology is frozen. They do not let anything die, nor do they let anything be born. That is why the philosopher dies a little every day and is born a little every day. I shared this collection of phrases with you last week. By the end of the book, you will have memorized them, because Sri will speak about this a great deal. Give up your life to truly live. This is the voice of Botano's silence. Truly, no one will enter the kingdom of heaven unless they are born again. Remember, Jesus Christ and Nicodemus. It is in dying that one is born to eternal life. Is it his day? Whose? São Francisco Assis. You die and are born into it. Why fear death? Alive, dying, born. Regeneration, spring, the human spring. Thus, the philosopher is ready to die because he knows how the process works. He lives this way. Life and death walk together. And therefore, neither of them ever ceases to be present at any moment. Not here, nor in any other place I may go. And this becomes something obvious. Even though he speaks of death with such naturalness, Plato condemns suicide. He says that the world is a prison of ignorance, but we should not escape from this prison. Without permission. There is an ancient philosophy, especially Roman and Stoic, which said that we come into the world out of a necessity for experience. It is like going to school, out of a need for learning. If you have not learned, you do not run away from school. What did people say before? not kalota or phala. There was another word. To skip class. That expression is used no more. Do not skip class. You still need to learn. Do not run away from the world before it gives you the teaching you came here to seek. That is why it is interesting that you will see that Socrates refuses to escape from prison. When his disciple, Crito, goes to his cell and says, "Socrates, let's go, let's escape." Do you know this story? He arrives at the cell. Crito was one of the few disciples of Socrates who had money. He was a wealthy man. He bribes the guard and says, "Socrates, let's go." Socrates says, "Escape to where?" "No, Socrates, I'm not here to philosophize now. I bribed the guard at the door. We have a few minutes to escape. Let's go." Escape from what, my dear? Socrates, escape from death. Socrates laughs and says, "Who escapes death? Have you ever seen anyone? Either you walk toward it or it walks toward you. It's better to keep the initiative." Who is it that flees from death? He knew that if he ran away, he would be a traitor, condemned to ostracism, seen as a coward, and all his ideas would fall into contempt. And he had many people whom he had inspired throughout his life. He had lived under the laws of Athens, and he would not betray them at the moment they turned against him. He had arguments. He refused to flee. He stayed until the end and accepted what was coming, that which the citizens of Athens had destined for him. Suicide is not recommended. Plato does not support it. Life has something to tell you. Only leave when you are invited to do so. Remain until you have learned the very last drop of the lesson that life has to teach you. A book that speaks deeply about this is the Bardo Thodol, the Tibetan Book of the Dead. First, let me tell you something. No classic book that discusses death is morbid. They teach us how to live, so there is no need to fear any of them. The Tibetan Book of the Dead, or Bardo Thodol, and the Egyptian Book of the Dead, or Book of the Hidden Abode. No good classic that speaks about death is morbid. You can read them with peace of mind. They teach us how to live, because life and death are intimately connected. It says that the body is not ours, and for this reason, we have a responsibility to use it properly. To whom does the body belong? To nature, so that she will take it back. It belongs to her. It is alone. And just as you are staying in a room that the inn of nature has lent you, look, take good care of this room, because it is not yours. You will have to return it. Lao Tzu said that the sages of old behaved as if they were guests of a very ceremonious host. Is nature not ceremonious? See how she keeps her house. If we don't interfere or make a mess, she keeps order. Because you are a guest of nature. Behave as if you were a guest of a very ceremonious host. And this is interesting for us to reflect upon. Between a materialist and a spiritualist, who takes better care of their body? The materialist cares about their body, but cares for it less than the spiritualist. Isn't that curious? The spiritualist, who disidentifies from the body, respects what is good for it, acknowledges its limitations, and provides what it needs, much more so than the materialist, who encloses the body in a glass case. It is strange, right? The body is the first to benefit. This is one of the arguments that, in fact, Plato himself presents. Living properly prepares us for death. As we have discussed, death and life walk side by side every day. And in the final moment, it will be the same. It will not change. The philosopher does not wish for death, but welcomes it with grace. Because he is familiar with the idea of regeneration, of allowing something new to emerge within himself every day. He sees this as natural. Duality is not just at life's end. This exists in every day of life. If there is no duality in your day, it means you are stagnant, because there should be. Something must die for something else to be born. Otherwise, we are not growing. That is the idealist's way. He has an ideal, and every day he moves closer to it. And each step is the death of something and the birth of something else. This is the normal process of life. The philosopher seeks to free himself from the body by giving attention to the matters of the soul. This is interesting. You will notice that Sri Ram, at all times, in every chapter, speaks about this. Matters of the soul already exist within you. So, we have such an artificial idea that we think matters of the soul are about imagining little angels playing harps. If you feel compassion for the suffering of humanity, that is a matter of the soul. If you have a deep love for someone and wish to refine that love, that too is a matter of the soul. If you wish the world were a more just place, that is already a matter of the soul. Remember that story that we are a mixture of one and the other. Both of these cores already exist within us. And which one will grow? That which you value, that which you nurture. Do you remember that Platonic parable often shared online and attributed? Funny. They credit 1,000 authors with the same thought. We go crazy, unsure whose it is or what it is. Today I was listening to a song on YouTube and checking, it said Beethoven, but he never wrote it. I think to make the music famous, they used Beethoven's name, then later changed it to their own. Anyway, the internet has these curious quirks. But the fact is, this idea truly is Platonic, because it says that you should consider that within you there is both a man and an animal bound together. The animal wants to move toward animal interests, which are instinctive, and the man wants to move toward human interests. These are values and virtues. When each wants to go a different way and they're tied together, one must drag the other. Who drags whom? Whoever is stronger. Who will be stronger? Who you feed more. And when do you feed them? Every thought, word, and action you take is like a spoonful of food in someone's mouth. That which you strengthen, invest in, the core of consciousness on which you focus, this is the one that will grow. But now, both already exist. They're in you. Matters of the body or matters of the soul. Your identification will cause one or the other to gain more strength and set the direction of your life. A superficial identity or a profound identity. This is a Platonic chaos, very ancient. He says, the philosopher enjoys the pleasures that come, but without anxiety. This is a beautiful phrase from Sri Ram, and I don't know anyone who expresses it so well. He says the following, I walk toward my ideal. If a gentle breeze blows, I delight in the gentle breeze. If there is a scorching heat, I suffer with the scorching heat. But neither one nor the other takes me off my path. Isn't that interesting? No problem. No one is medieval or hiding to avoid pleasure, which is ridiculous. Pleasure and pain are life. Now, the problem is when you have an ideal, a goal, a dream. And the breeze went that way, oh, let me go after it. Or the sun comes from here, let me run away from it. In other words, neither one nor the other robs me of myself. This is fidelity to oneself in consciousness. Neither one nor the other takes me off my path. You already have to go to class. We are already finishing up. So, enjoy the pleasures that come, but without anxiety. Anxiety arises when you desire other things more than you desire your ideal of life, more than you desire to know yourself. Something becomes more important in your life than your sense of purpose. You know what you can conclude from this. You have no sense of purpose. And the sense of purpose cannot be in second place, otherwise you will never reach it. It must always come first. The philosopher purifies their intelligence and brings forth their spiritual independence, or mukti, which means freedom. Mukti is the word for freedom in Sanskrit. Freedom is connected to purity. It is about keeping open the channel through which intelligence, kindness, and generosity flow into the world. If you block this channel, do you know what you will become? Whatever the wind brings. Where the wind blows, you go. If you lack inner determination, you are shaped by outside forces. You will become whatever the collective dictates. See? You are shaped by your choices or by the world around you. If you follow the wind, you are not in control of yourself. So there are not two options. You are driving the vehicle or in the back seat, blindfolded, driven by someone else. You do not know where or why, but you will serve an interest, not your own. Therefore, necessarily, freedom is connected to purification. Keep the channel unobstructed. Remember that last week I spoke to you about a poem by a poet named Rumi, in which he says, "Do not seek love, seek to keep." Unobstructed the obstacles you have built so that love may pass through you. You simply open the door, and love flows through. Do not try to make love. No one can build it. Love is a force of nature. Simply allow it to flow through you. And what does he say? That the philosopher purifies their intelligence, and Sri Ram will argue at length about this. His hypothesis: today, intelligence is rare. What do you think? They are rare. In general, people who accumulate information without depth become naive, easily manipulated, lacking depth, and therefore possessing little capacity for analysis and discernment. If you take an experienced, mature, and astute person, it is very difficult for them to fall for the scams that are so prevalent in our society today. We generally live among people who are very naive and easily manipulated. The schemes used to deceive people are very simplistic. I know you are already tired of hearing about this, but I always remember whom. My grandmother. There's no way around it. Yesterday, I was asked to talk about Grandma Lucia's precepts. Almost ready. She was an illiterate old lady. I would go up to her, and we would try to trick her. "What do you think you're doing, girl? While you were with the flower, I was back with the beiju. I'd look at you, and that was it." No one could fool her. She was sharp and shrewd. She was a simple person. Isn't it common for us to see naive people nowadays? And sometimes cultured, easily manipulated by anything. Even the political schemes that manipulate us seem to be getting more and more foolish, increasingly blatant, suppressive, and superficial. People become naive. The lack of intelligence leads to vulnerability, to naivety. It is a difficult thing. May something protect humankind. In fact, Epictetus used to say this: protect your mind, and it will protect you. Something must protect humanity if it does not possess awakened intelligence. It's very complicated living under herd psychology. And he says that intelligence is a rare phenomenon precisely because people are superficial and do not know themselves. When the past no longer dominates, obscures, or directs the present, a new being is born within us. I am not just the sum of what has happened to me. At 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 years old, I have learned from all of this and from this entire arsenal of information. I look at the present with clarity. With the full essence of everything I have lived, I look at the present with clarity. And not with traumas, with prejudices, with that burden behind me being dragged through life. At this moment, we are creations of the past. It is almost as if we apply this personal history to everything new that appears, so things. There is no way to see them as they are. Everything is labeled according to the personal experiences I have had. They are not seen with the clear gaze that allows you to see deeply. We are a product of the past. And we still believe that this past is our identity. Yet it is all transient. As the very word suggests, it has passed. In other words, it is disposable. Its essence lies in the way I perceive the world. To be present in body and soul in the current moment. Inner purity grants the highest quality to the functioning of all aspects of being. Intelligence that is intense and focused, like a flame. So, from the moment you achieve a state of purity, purifying yourself of selfishness, freeing yourself from the contamination of prejudice, from the ready-made ideas of your past, The energy of life flows through you and maximizes your entire potential. Basically, the whole chapter will discuss this to some extent. The flow of life, when it passes through you, will develop intelligence and will cultivate all human potentials. It will lead you to the highest human potential. If you allow the flow of life to pass through you, the world has become. Shadows were born because people became opaque. This is Taoism. The light passes through you, encounters dust, and creates shadow. If the light passed through you and you were an unobstructed channel, you would bring light to the world. Shadows were born in the world because people became opaque. This is Taoism, essentially saying the same thing. Isn't it curious? It is the same voice echoing across all corners of the world. Socrates used to say that he constantly dreamed of the same thing. Has anyone ever experienced having recurring dreams throughout their life? It is an interesting experience. Socrates said that throughout his entire life, he dreamed of someone telling him that he should make music. He said, "I fulfilled that request." Philosophy is music made with the soul. The musician knows how to play a lyre, knows how to play a flute. I know how to use all the things in life to produce harmony. The philosopher creates harmony with all aspects of life. And he says, anyone who creates beauty with one instrument will one day have to create it with all. Every seeker of beauty, become a philosopher, because it is music made with the soul. In proportion to the purity of your mind will be the serenity of your death. Wow, did you read that? Listen. In proportion to the purity of your mind will be the serenity of your death. Cannot improvise. It is a process of purification over life. Remember, Buddhist philosophy mentions this. Purity is power. Happiness is not pleasure, but rather purity of mind and heart, which arises naturally without needing to be sought after. In other words, human happiness is related to peace, serenity, and inner stability that allows you to be in the world without ceasing to be within yourself. Like a lighthouse that illuminates the ocean around it, without ceasing to remain in the place where it was created and built. From within yourself, you illuminate the world around you. You do not betray yourself in order to bring light to any place in the world. That is, it is from this fidelity to oneself, which is the purity of mind and heart, that a person finds happiness. Then you remember that phrase from Kant that I mentioned. Kant used to say that human happiness is something you always find when you are not seeking it. Strange. You pursue human duty, and human happiness arises as a byproduct. If you pursue happiness as your main goal, do you know what you will want? To be happy at any cost. And the price may be too high. It could be an inhuman happiness, one that comes from another's suffering, another's pain, at the expense of what belongs to someone else. That will not be a human happiness. Now, seek justice and fraternity, and happiness will follow. This happiness is human. It's an interesting idea to reflect on. The purity and peace of heart that come to those who strive to live as true human beings, to seek their own kingdom. First and foremost, and all other things will be added unto you. Remember, a universal precept. Only through the soul do we see the essence of things, and only essence distinguishes each thing. The autonomy of the soul in relation to the body in this world gives rise to a keen intelligence. Keen intelligence comes from knowing who you are, amidst those things where you are merely present. Who are you amid all this outer shell, this accumulation of memory, of biological and psychological elements that you have absorbed from your environment, from your family? Who are you? Amidst this, intelligere to choose among. The highest form of intelligence is identity. And if I know how to choose myself, I also know the essence of the things around me. If not, I am utilitarian. I use things, but do not know what they or I am. And finally, in conclusion, he will say, for the free person, life and death are the same. That citizen there, whether with a bicycle or without one, continues moving forward. Ever since I once decided to challenge a librarian, sometimes it's good to challenge certain professionals, isn't it? And I went up to him and said, "Look, people are destroying books. Soon there won't be any more books. Everything will be digital. What do you think about that?" I thought he'd get annoyed, but his response surprised me. He said, "As long as the information stays, the medium doesn't matter. For me, it makes no difference. If you put the information on a stone, that's fine. If you use papyrus, that's fine. As long as the information isn't lost, I'm not attached to the medium." He disarmed me and gave me a lesson. Because a spiritual person is also not attached to the medium. Life goes on and we can figure out the medium. Ahead, it will be something else. There will be a medium, I don't know what. But life goes on, so it doesn't matter. We will not get caught up in trivialities. Physical life is simply a medium for the greater life, which will continue, supported by other things. With a bicycle or without a bicycle. Understanding this essence, this mystery of life, he concludes with these two phrases that I have brought to you, which I find very beautiful, and which allow us to engage in reflections like this. Two classic Indian books, one of them the Bhagavad Gita and the other, the Ramayana, which I included on my own because I love this Indian epic. The first, the Bhagavad Gita, says, "The wise do not grieve for the living nor for the dead." If there is anything worth lamenting, lament ignorance, lament cruelty, for these are a form of death in life which prevents you from progressing throughout your journey. It causes life to become stagnant. And this beautiful phrase, this passage from the Ramayana, where Rama, the prince, speaks to his brother Bhagavad. The heart, Bhagavad, pay attention to your heart and do not suffocate it. There dwells the clear soul, never stained, seeing all that we do or intend to do. Thus, let a person remain in silence and find their heart. This is the only true salvation. Life is brilliant and colorful for a fleeting moment, like the sunset. Then it passes, and who can prevent it from leaving? Therefore, Bharata, since you are in this perilous body, lament your own condition. Mourn for yourself and grieve for nothing else. I find this very beautiful, very good. Mourn the fact that you are imprisoned and stagnant, mourn ignorance. Death and life, you do not know what they are. You mourn what you do not know you will lose, because you do not know it. Perhaps you will never lose life. Why are you weeping for it? Weep. Mourn for yourself, imprisoned within a cell of blindness, of ignorance. Mourn for yourself and grieve for nothing else. Let the rest follow the natural flow of life. Life is just. Do not mourn the loss of something you do not even know if you will truly lose. Do not anticipate. Live each moment as a human being ought to live. The wise do not grieve, neither for the living nor for the dead. Well, that is all. What I will bring to you today is a double encouragement to read Sri Ram and also to read Plato. We have now gone through 4 dialogues. And I hope this can serve as a good foundation for your reflections.